Hello, thanks for joining me today. Topic I'm going to discuss is footwear considerations. So first, we'll discuss a little bit about me. My name is Craig Rigney. I'm a physical therapist with Village Physical Therapy and Fitness. I graduated from Damon College in 2000. I've been in orthopedic practice for, hard to believe, over 20 years. I am one of the co-founders of Ganada Walworth Physical Therapy, which we founded in 2003. My own specific orthopedic interests include the shoulder, spine, and the knee. Personally, I live in Fairport with my wife, Andrea. I have a daughter, Jenna, twin boys, Ethan and Jacob. My hobbies, I enjoy camping, hiking with my family, um, running, which kind of brings up this footwear considerations topic. And what I perhaps enjoy the most is watching my kids play sports. So let's get started. So, real quick, I went to a workshop years ago, and the topic was exactly this. It was footwear consideration and what are the best shoes on the market. And I remember raising my hand at the time and asking, what this gentleman thought. And his comment was it is such an evolving industry and it changes constantly. And one shoe comes to the market one year and comes back, and it's not the same. So it's a very evolving um, idea, and it's not easy. So first and foremost, shopping for shoes is not easy. You're going to hear me say this over and over and over again: is you really want to trust who you're buying from. Because you have to know your foot. Some people have flat feet, some people have high arches, and you need to know your foot so you know what type of shoe is better for your foot. You have to also understand that shoes change. So what may have been good 2 years ago may not be good today. The one thing that Bruce brought up, and we'll talk about this in a bit, was some shoes are made in the United States, some shoes are not, and so there's different standards. And one year, if it was made in the United States and it was outsourced to China, for instance, sometimes the quality of that shoe may have regressed. So shoes change. Biggest thing we have to talk about is fashion or function. Um, Conversely, more expensive isn't always better, and cheaper isn't always better. So, how as consumers are you supposed to know that? It goes back to you really have to know who you are buying from. Um, Another one, know your shoe size. I remember thinking for years I was a 10, and I'm going to find out I wasn't. Going back to what I said in the last slide, you have to know your foot structure. You have to know that different structure foot is going to make you more applicable for certain types of shoes. Try on your shoes. How many times we buy something online, we did it at home, we just put it on. You have to try on your shoes, make sure it's a good fit for your foot. Know your activity, because your activity is going to be um, involved with what type of shoe you're going to buy. So you don't want to buy, say, a real thin sole running shoes if you're going to be hiking. Pay attention to your foot after wearing your shoes. Look at your tread. We'll talk about that. And also, you have to understand shoes wear out. So, shoe shopping. As with everything, you can go a cheaper route or you can go to a more expensive route. Um, it's a very different experience with a sporting goods store versus a pet orthos store. What is a pet orthos? I myself am a customer of a pet orthos store. A pet orthos is someone who specializes in ankle foot mechanics as it relates to shoes. So they are typically, you're not your Fleet Feet. Well, Fleet Feet's an example here locally, but they're not your Dick's Sporting Goods or a mall-based shoe store. It's going to be an independently owned, where someone actually comes down and actually measure your foot. The best screening tool of the facility that you're looking to see if they're going to take the time to measure your foot. So when you walk in, do they have actually one of those foot measurers that they put your foot in to see? Do you have a wide foot? Do you have a narrow foot? So you have to know your foot before you know what type of shoe you need. Is the salesperson knowledgeable versus a temporary employee? The pet orthozone stores, as I mentioned above, you're typically speaking, you're going to get someone who's more knowledgeable. You're going to get someone who is better trained as compared to, no offense to Dick's Sporting Goods, but a sporting goods store, you just may have a high school student or a temporary employee who's fitting your feet. Um, One of my best stories is I went shopping with my wife and went into a pet overton store, and she walked in and she was looking at the back counter, and the gentleman comes up and says, well, what are you looking for? And she said, well, I really like those pink ones back there. And he says, well, it's not about what looks nice. It's about, what your needs are, and let's look at your foot. And so instead of him letting her lead the way of what color and style she wanted, he looked at her foot, and it was discussions of, what are your needs for this shoe? Um, Shoe size, imperative. I'd be the first to admit that I've bought shoes that I thought fit and didn't fit. It's very important to have your foot measured. Uh, Again, one of the big things you're going to hear from me is trust the people you're buying from. And the best screening tool is, do they use one of those foot measurers? Feet change, pregnancy, weight gain, loss, aging. What I was, 10 years ago may not be what I am today. Narrow versus wide foot. All of these ideas are important, and you have to know your foot. If width is not noticed, risk ankle sprains, blisters. I bought a pair of shoes that I knew were rated really well. They were dress shoes, which for me was always a challenge. And I bought them a size up. And the reason why was they were out of my size. And I thought, for a good price, surely these will work. And I walked out of the office and I almost sprained my ankle because my foot was loose inside my shoe. And I almost fell over. But had I bought the proper shoe, this wouldn't happen. So obviously I did. Foot pain. If you're wearing shoes and you have foot pain, it's probably time to reassess. Blisters, reassess. But again, you have to know your shoe size. One size fits all, or does it? This was where I was kind of thinking about there's two types, well, it's three types of foot. You have a neutral foot, you have one that may have a high arch, and you have another one that may have a flat arch. And, people don't know. I've been in PT for 20 years, and there's people come in, they say, I have a high arch. Well, they have a high arch in standing, but they may not have it in sitting, and vice versa. Or, they sit in a chair and they'll say, I have a really high arch when I'm sitting and sitting down and look at my foot has a really high arch. I have them stand up and walk, and see that arch collapses right out. And so they think they have a high arch, and they don't. But the point is, you have to know what is your foot, because you can't get a low arch shoe for someone with a high arch. Someone with a high arch requires more foot support. You can't possibly have a high arch foot, have no support inside your shoe, and then your foot's going to constantly it's not going to have the support that you need. Again, I mentioned it before with the wide versus narrow foot. History of foot conditions: plantar fasciitis, bunion, or ankle foot surgery. Plantar fasciitis is the number one issue that when I focus on when I have someone coming in the office, when I'm looking at their feet, I ask them, have you had plantar fasciitis? What is plantar fasciitis? First of all, well, it's an inflammation of the plantar fascia on the bottom part of your foot. If you have plantar fasciitis, chances are you have a flat arch when you're walking. And so if you have a flat arch, or you've had plantar fasciitis, or you had a bunion, you have to get a specific shoe. You just can't go one size fits all. And again, how do you know if you have a flat arch or high arch? Look yourself or ask for help. And the easiest way I tell people to scream for themselves is get out of the shower and look at what footprint you leave on your towel. Is it, do you see the entire foot, or you just see the outside portions of it? So here's two good examples. The picture on your left is a flat arch. That's someone we call pronation. It's when someone, as they walk, their arch collapses and they actually a little twisting on the ankle. And the picture on the right is a high arch, a supinated foot. And so clearly you can't expect the same shoe to work on both of those feet. So I have this picture here. You look on the left, you have a high arch, you have a supinated foot. And then you look at and I used to own these old Navy flip-flops. Do you possibly think something that thin will support an arch that high? And here's a good example. Winter, you have a high arch foot, and you can also have a high arch sandal. Now, again, how do you know what sandals are better for what feet? You got to know this stuff. You have to trust someone who's selling you the sandals, selling you the shoes. I personally wear, they're called Olakais, but they are a higher arch flip-flop that I wear in the summer. I used to wear the Old Navy flip-flops, and you saw them last. Of course, those are my 20s. Things are different when you turn 40. But I try to wear a high arch sandal, or the Birkenstocks. Both of those high arch sandals are going to be much more applicable for someone with a high arch foot. do shoes change? It's a good idea to reassess and not just keep buying the same shoe. You know, you never know. I mean, as your body changes, is the same shoe going to be good for, 10 years from now that what you had 10 years ago? And the answer is no. As I mentioned when I started, the shoe quality and products change. I remember going back to this workshop. New Balance was predominantly made in the United States. I remember asking this gentleman, who's a pet orthopedist, why is it that some New Balance are 40 and some New Balance are 120? And he said, well, the New Balance made in the United States are held at a higher standard. And because they're held at a higher standard, they may be more firmly or structurally built. Well, you're going to pay for that. So you're going to have a difference in price. New Balance isn't predominantly made in the United States anymore, at least it wasn't, years ago. So you have to know products change. And, just because you had a New Balance shoe 5 years ago, it may not be the same as now. Foot structures also change. If you're a person on your feet all day, people do develop an arch that starts to collapse. So you may have a neutral foot, 10 years ago, and then you develop into a pronated foot. Any bunions, calluses, or abnormal marks on your foot is a red flag. When I look at people's feet to see, what kind of foot do they have, I will literally see calluses on the bottom portion of your foot. And calluses are indicative of either A, not wearing shoes, or just not wearing the proper shoe, or in some case, people wearing a work boot, for instance, that isn't really a good supportive shoe for the foot. But again, I think it goes back to, you got to know your foot. And once again, have your foot measured every year. What is recommended one year may not be the next. And again, you have to know the specialists who you're buying from. You have to trust people you're buying from, that they know their products, and they're giving you the right advice. Look at treadwear. We talked about the different styles feet. If you have a supinator, if you're a supinated foot, you walk on the outside portions of your foot. So you see in that first picture, you're going to have treadwear. And what does that mean by treadwear? Just like a tire treadwear, you're going to have less rubber support in there. If you are a pronated, flat arches, you're going to have treadwear on the inside portion of your foot. Normal, hopefully, is more in the, again, the middle picture there. Make sure the salesperson looks at your current shoe and fit a new shoe that reinforces your wear pattern. So if you're a supinator, clearly you don't want to give yourself a flat arch shoe that you won't wear properly. But a good salesman will look at your last shoe and get a good idea of what kind of shoe is going to be good for you. Fashion versus function. You got to purchase function, not fashion. Whenever I think about this, I always think about the story I told of my wife, who went to the pink shoes in the back, and the gentleman brought up these clog hoppers. And the reason why they brought up the clog hoppers for her is she has a supinated foot. And so what she was wanting was the smaller pink shoe that was on the shelf. And the gentleman said, here are the shoes that are best for your foot. And, lo and behold, it was a good purchase for her. And I'll show you a picture here in a minute, but, I never forget this. I had a patient who came in. She was a high school age student who was a soccer player, and she sprained her ankle. And, here she comes into the office for physical therapy treatment, and she's wearing a high arched boot. And it's just, clearly, does this high arched boot fit for someone with an ankle sprain? We talked about this. I my own personal experiences. I went to a store. It was a pet orthopedist's own store, who, looked at my feet, looked at the way I walked, and then asked me, what am I looking for? And he brought me shoes, as opposed to me going up to a shelf and saying what looks nice. You got to think of function. Foot structure versus high heels or flip-flops. Again, I keep saying this, but you can't possibly expect to have a high arch, or you need an arch support, and wear flat flip-flops. Going back to your shoes, is on around your feet all day, or you're sitting a lot. When you're running versus walking, hiking versus walking, shoes are made for different stresses. And so you have to know, what are you doing, and what are your shoes going to be used for? You're not going to buy a semi truck and drive your kids to and from school. You got to know, again, what are your shoes going to be used for, because that's going to dictate of what's the best shoe for your foot. So this actually happened. So you take that picture on the left, and it was a high school age girl, again, soccer player, sprained her ankle. And she literally walked in with a cute boot. That's exactly what she called it, and along those lines. And I just think that's funny is, can these two pictures, can they possibly work? It's more expensive, better. If you have to move the Michael Jordan poster to get to the New Balance, be alarmed. Expensive isn't always better. Sometimes quality is improved with higher cost, but not always. Should you go into a store that only has shoes starting at $200? Well, it's not me, but some people feel that way. The example I gave before, a pet orthopedist suggests made in the United States is a good tool because the USA standards are higher. Look for a supportive shoe, not necessarily one that's more expensive. Again, my personal experience is I trust the specialists in the field who are aware of changes and who are going to point me, hopefully, in the best direction, not the most expensive direction. What I also like to do is I double check the costs of what the specialist gives me with online to make sure I'm getting a fair price. If he or she sells me a shoe for $150, if I find it online for $100, I'm going to be alarmed. And you got to trust who you're buying from. And you also have to appreciate it's an evolving industry. What's good one year may not be good the next. Foot structure. We keep talking about this, but flat feet, you have to be considerate of flat feet. You have to be considerate of your foot structure and your proper shoe. Screening, again, look at your foot when you're getting out of the shower and see, can you see the entire wear pattern of your foot, or do you see just the corners? When you walk, do you have an excessive, we call it toe out? When you watch someone walk behind, you see, instead of just seeing 2 or 3 toes, you see their entire foot. Personally, I have a toe-in gait, and so I needed a shoe with a higher arch. I walked into this place, I was wearing these running shoes that were extremely narrow. They were very lightweight. I bought them because I didn't know what I was doing, honestly. I was getting into running, and I saw these are running shoes, and they were light, and I said, well, this has got to be for me. And as I was running, I realized I couldn't get above a couple miles without having joint pain. So I went to a pet orthopedist store, and they looked at me and they says, you have a toe-in gait. You need to have a bigger shoe with more supportive on your arch, which is what I did. They fit me with Brooks, Brooks is usually known to have a higher arch. My foot was much more supportive compared to when I was using a Nike or a New Balance. And again, look at the footwear and make sure your shoes have tread where they're needed. The example that I just used, I had these really narrow shoes, is if this is the bottom of my shoe, I didn't have a lot of tread in here. And so why on earth was I wearing a shoe where I didn't have a lot of tread in here? But when you look at my regular shoe, I had tread wear. So I was completely dead wrong in the direction I was going in until I got advice. Again, what's the function? We talked about this a few minutes ago, but you have to understand that shoes are made differently for different function. Running shoes are different than cross trainings, which differ from the narrow running shoes that I was using. Cross training is going to have more support side to side. Lightweight versus a heavier, more stable shoe. If you can get away with something lighter weight, great. But if you're going to put a lot of strain and stress on it, you need a stable shoe. Wearing your shoes all day versus sliding on going outside. Can you probably go a little bit less expensive? I mean, I have my own cheapy flip-flops that I step in when I'm going outside in the summer, and slide-ins that I just wear outside to the mailbox and come back in. And I'm not buying a $100 shoe to be able to do that. But if I knew if I was going to be wearing it all day, I'd spend more money on a better shoe. And also have to understand that a walking shoe may be different than a household or winter shoe. I have my favorite slippers I wear in the winter. They're nice, they're warm. Are they supportive? No. There are slippers you sit down, you prop your feet up. They're going to be less supportive than my kind of clunkier running shoes. But again, you need to identify the function you're going to use for the shoe and then trust the specialist. So here's 2 good examples. So that you look at the top part, and I'm sorry you can't really see the words very well on this, but the point of the matter is this: is you have a cross-training shoe that has stability on the side to side. It has a different tread on the front part, just so you can be used to running side to side versus bottom running shoe. You have a ventilated forefoot to let your feet breathe. You have more kind of tread at the front part of it, and then you have a cushion on your back, even though you're supposed to do like not supposed to have heel strike. But point is again, a cross-training shoe that has a less cushioned sole is going to be different than a running shoe that's going to have a more cushioned sole. And you're going to have a different arch inside the shoe versus a cross-training versus a running. So the point is this, is would I use a running shoe for quote unquote cross-training? Of course not. I have a running shoe I use, and I have a regular gym shoe I use if I'm doing other stuff. So again, just know it's not a one size fits all. What are you looking for based on what are your needs? Very important, shoe lifespan, they wear out. Now here's where you're going to get all kinds of different advice. Usually if there's underlying issues, your body will often tell you. I had a lady I treated who she had a significant leg length discrepancy that I caught. She was about a ½ inch off of one side compared to the other, and she was getting a lot of back and hip pain. Well, I got her set up with someone who put some inserts inside her shoe. He actually made a custom-made shoe and to level her out. To level her out. And what she noticed is when the shoes were starting to wear down, she was getting soreness. And so you just have to appreciate, your shoe has a lifespan, and usually your body would tell you when you need to change your shoes. Running, I know that this is a guideline I was always told, is if you're running, you should replace your shoe every 6 months or 300 miles. Again, depends on use, but what I noticed is I could tell my feet were hurting, and it was kind of just telling me I need to look at, replacing my shoes. But again, I think you're going to know when it's time to replace, and you just got to listen to it. Foot pain, knee pain, hip pain, low back pain, or just feeling different. Again, that's usually a sign. But then I also appreciate some wear out more than others, lighter weight versus heavier. But again, I think you just listen to your body, you listen to your feet, you listen to your joints. So I think, to sum it all up, I think the hope, the point I've made, and I'll probably beat a dead horse, but, all feet are not created equal. There's a very big difference between someone with flat arches versus someone with high arches. And the same flip side, all shoes are not created equal. So, when you think about, again, are you going to use a lightweight, walking shoe if you're going to do cross training? The answer is no. The hardest part, though, is I think finding a trustworthy shoe store that is going to give you advice to fit you for a good shoe based on your need. But again, you got to listen to your body, and you're going to know if it's not a good fit. And if it's not a good fit, you got to move on. And I know some people get frustrated with that. They say, I just bought the shoes, I thought I'd break them in after 2 months, and it's just not working. Well, you got to listen to it. The worst thing you can do is run with a shoe that doesn't fit and then get blisters and all kinds of other issues. Replace your shoes every 6 months to a year, depending on your use. Listen for the shoe red flags, such as the blisters or calluses. And you got to think function, not fashion. Don't pick out the shoe, let the shoe pick you out. You've got to make sure the shoe is going to fit your needs. So I just want to thank you all for listening, and just to make things easier, if you have any suggestions or any questions for that matter, feel free to send me an email. That's my email at the bottom of the screen. It's craigr@villagefit.com. And again, thank you for listening.